Well, the first two gray areas that we look at, sponsored content and product placement, seem like potentially sort of aggressive or irritating advertisement on steroids. When we turn to these last two gray areas, the potential for abuse or for serious negative side effects seems to loom much larger. So the first thing that we want to look at is net neutrality. And the idea behind net neutrality is very simple. The idea is that every part of the net should be treated neutrally. That is, there is no favoritism. No area gets cordoned off unless that's what its creators want. No area gets faster access. No company gets favoritism, and so on. And the internet has been governed by that principle. Essentially, informally, net neutrality prohibits internet service providers like Comcast or Frontier or Verizon, as well as state and federal governments, from restricting internet access or regulating speeds. It also prohibits charging higher rates for access, restricting access to some domains, or controlling the speed of access, which is sometimes called throttling. It prohibits restricting types of sites, types of platforms, types of access equipment, and communication modes. So, for instance, peer-to-peer software like BitTorrent is allowed under net neutrality. But of course, nothing intrinsic to the internet requires net neutrality at all. And so there's been a running battle since really the beginning of the internet, but particularly over the last decade or so, between advocates for net neutrality and people who would like to overthrow net neutrality. Now, a surprising hero of that story was the former FCC chairman, Tom Wheeler. He was a Republican appointee and was widely feared by people who were advocates of net neutrality because they thought for sure he would oversee the dismantling of net neutrality. But surprisingly, Wheeler, in fact, declared the internet a utility, made it subject to rules that encoded net neutrality as part of its very foundation. And those rules were upheld by court rulings, and so it looked like net neutrality might remain and be a fact of the internet in American life. Unfortunately, however, the next head of the FCC, a man by the name of Ajit Pai, who was an outspoken foe of net neutrality and a former Verizon lobbyist, became the new head of the FCC under the Trump administration. As people predicted, in fact, as Ajit Pai predicted, the FCC voted to reverse previous FCC policy and effectively undid net neutrality. Pai also advocated for and passed rules allowing internet service providers to use your data without your permission, and allowing internet service providers to set data caps on site and applications of their choosing, including setting limits on their direct competitors. Now, when you think about net neutrality, you might think to yourself, well, this seems like just such a innocuous and worthwhile thing. Why would anyone object to it? Why are people so actively trying to overthrow net neutrality? Well, two benefits to undermining net neutrality emerge from the examples above. And they're benefits that we've seen before: money and control. So, for instance, the Motion Picture Association and recording companies have long sought to increase profits from movies and recordings by preventing people from sharing content or limiting the period in which people have access to content. Likewise, many internet service providers would like to charge for bandwidth, data quality, and access to parts of the internet. Mobile providers have already started tiered pricing on bandwidth as well as data quantities, and companies like Verizon now offer tiers for landline internet service. In effect, these companies would like to charge consumers for access to various types of content, for using various applications, and etc., just as cable companies now charge for movie and sports packages. The difference, however, lies in the fact that these companies don't have any increased costs for such content or applications, since they don't have to buy the content from producers in the way that cable companies have to buy sports packages. In fact, it costs internet service providers money to restrict internet access or to control bandwidth. So why would they do it? Well, they've created, in a way, the perfect product there. It's a product that doesn't cost them hardly anything, but they can sell as if it were an expensive benefit. Now, the second reason, of course, is control, but control also has a profit side. If internet service providers can direct you to various outlets or restrict you from other outlets, they can charge the outlets for allowing access. And this practice is all too common in American life already. For instance, on the CSULB campus, you can't buy Pepsi. Why? Well, the campus effectively isolates people. It's like the internet minus net neutrality. And once you've got that captive, isolated audience, then companies can pay CSULB for that access to that captive consumer base. And in fact, the university sells access to their captive consumer base to various vendors, restaurants, and Coca-Cola, for instance. Similar arrangements can be found at airports, at concerts, and potentially any place with limited access. Of course, as noted above, control has more cynical and ominous overtones, and restricting internet and other communication medias is one feature of repressive governments. And getting rid of this norm, these regulations that would guarantee net neutrality, this facilitates or makes it easier for these sorts of ominous changes to occur in the United States or in any country that abandons principles of net neutrality.